Willow Creek Springs presents Healthy Living with your host, Joe Grumbine.
Stay in office commuted or erased the sentences of 11 people serving life in prison for marijuana. I was one of them.
Crikey. That's
Unfortunately, I served more time than most murderers do in the United States, which is only 12.4 years.
That's disgraceful. That's really bad.
Yes.
God, that's shocking.
That's the nature of, we should wait until our audience is here, but that's the nature of our U.S. Cannabis law.
Yeah, it's disgraceful is probably the softest term you could use. When we discovered that Craig was locked up, our organization was sort of in its infancy, and I was fighting a case. They were trying to lock me up for 12 years for the same thing or similar enough. And I was in court for 6 years fighting it. They locked me up 5 times for small periods of time while I was, winning my freedom. But, that was actually how this whole organization got started was, because of my case. All right, here we go, folks. We're going to get started here, and hang on. We got a little introductory song now, and sit tight. We'll introduce everybody in a minute or two.
I hope I don't have to sing.
No singing required. Just sit back and enjoy Roger Daltrey and his voice. And if you know the story of this movie, it's kind of an interesting connection to this show.
On your eye shade, you know where to put the coin. Hey, you getting drunk? So sorry, I got you stuck. Hey, you smoking combination, fixing a fire. Hey, I'm not old, it's too long. Don't try to gain my trust. You ain't gonna follow me any of those ways, although you think you must.
Well, unfortunately, we don't claim to be part of the Who, but
No, we do not. Absolutely. But we're not going to take it. And that's part of the point of this whole thing. So I'd like to welcome everybody to today's A Cup of Joe. And this is a great show. We've been looking forward to this show for a long time, for a little while anyways. And if anybody's been paying attention, we've been upping the standard of the show. We've been bringing in some great guests. We're actually working on producing a better show. And on that note, if anybody really knows how to fix a glitch that goes between Zoom and a Facebook live stream, please get a hold of me, because I've got this glitch that is keeping me from posting this Zoom on the page I want to. And instead, we're posting it on a different page and sharing it to the page I want to, which makes it really complicated for our new friend over in the UK who wanted some information about how to share this. So the good news is the show is being live streamed on the Human Solution International page. It's just going through a little bit of a circuitous route. So anyways, I want to welcome you to the show. And I'm sorry, I've got somebody sending me a ton of pictures now that I didn't ask for. And my phone's going to ding for a minute. Anyways, I have Joanne Griffiths here with us, and she has got an incredible story to tell. And what's interesting, though, is we all have incredible stories to tell. So as she popped in and saw Craig, she's like, well, who are you? What's going on? And Craig was just telling his story about how he came into this. And what I want to do really is, Joanne, you've got a lot of story to tell. And a lot of times we have guests that have a little bit to tell, and we just sort of, have a conversation and fill it in. But I really want to get to your story because I think it's very important. And there's a lot of information that is wrong about people's perception about the state of cannabis legalization in the States or Canada or anywhere else. And we've got issues in the UK that really most of us don't even know about. We don't know how we have a guest and some people in Ireland who are dealing with some cases, but it's not the same set of rules as it is in Great Britain, is it?
No, it's not the same at all. No, I believe Ireland's got quite a good setup, really, compared to ourselves.
Well, I want to welcome you to the show, and I've got a little dog that's just really barking up. Let me shut the door here.
He has to hide from the dog. But one thing in the meantime, Joanne, that I would like to hear of, can you tell us a little bit about how the law regarding cannabis in the UK stands right now? What's legal and what's really not, I guess, is my question.
It's only legal medically, so and only for, the law was changed for a doctor on the specialist register to be able to prescribe medical cannabis for any condition, really. But then we have a body called NICE here, National Institute for Health Research, and they basically say what's allowed and what's not, and what's good for the public purse, so to speak. And at the moment, they're saying more trials need to be done before it can be rolled out. So we still are seeing only 5 prescriptions in 5 years for medical cannabis in the UK on the National Health Service. That means it's free. But there have been, lots of clinics, private clinics opened up throughout the UK. I think there's well over 40 now. And you can get prescribed through a doctor there for pain and epilepsy, MS, things like that, neuropathic pain and stuff. So there's that's the route everyone's going. But for the children, there is only 2 pediatric doctors prescribing. So it means that their books are now closed. So a lot of the children, they are, their parents are having to go to the black market to get their children's medicine, which it's not regulated. They don't know what's in it. And that's where we're at, really, in the UK. It's not happening. It's not getting legalized as such. And of course, for the children, you don't know what, who are good people, who are bad people. I'm not saying that there's a lot of people that do a lot of good, and that we have compassionate clubs and things like that throughout the UK where people try and help other people that are sick, but not, you could end up as a parent going to somebody that's not a very nice person, and you don't know what you're giving your child.
So when you get a prescription, let's just say in the best possible case scenario, and you find, this physician that will write a prescription, and where do you go to get that prescription fulfilled?
There's clinics, so there's attached to the clinics are often, they have their own pharmacies, or there are a few other pharmacies, but actually you can go anywhere you like with it. You could go to your local pharmacy and say, can you fulfill this? And they would then have to get in touch with the medical importers or the people that are producing that medicine, and then fulfill that way. But you don't know what they're going to charge you. So often enough, it's probably best to speak to them and see what they're going to charge.
it's
for
quite a
epilepsy, which I'll
process,
take
though.
quite a bit.
It's quite a process. Like, let's just say, like, you're in a situation, and you're going to tell us a story about your son, but you're in a situation where likely it's pretty dramatic for you to go and try to go through all these hoops and satisfy whatever their requirements are. But you would think that by the time you get that prescription, you need the medicine, right? I mean, it's not like, oh, in a month I'm going to need it, but it sounds like it would take quite a bit of time, and there's a lot of unknown factors, like you said, how much it's going to cost, where it's coming from, even what type it is, like, and before we really get deep into this, I just want to understand, like, this is so crazy because on some level, your rules are in better shape than ours. But in most ways, it's not. But in that one way, like, our federal government says, no, just no, there's nothing. No, 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 no. No medical use. You can't have any. It's dangerous. No, no, no. And they send guys like Craig Cecil to prison for life for having anything to do with it. And then we have our states' rights, which is all of the legalities that we have, and it varies from over here to over there, one city, the next county. Everybody's got a different set of rules, and they don't have anything to do with each other. But the one thing we cannot do here, and doctors have lost their licenses, and I know doctors that have lost their licenses, doctors cannot prescribe this plant. They can't. It's the craziest thing.
So is that just where you are, or is that that is, because I thought that it was legal in some states?
It's legal in the states under state law, but the physician's licensing is a federal licensing. And so you get licensed in a state, but you also have a federal license. And so the federal agency rules over all of that. And so in the federal law, which is superior, is the supreme law over all the states in certain areas, that says it's Schedule 1, which is no known medical use, highly dangerous, highly addictive, and you cannot have it at all. You can't even research it. And so the states are rejecting the federal laws and risking federal action. But you know how we are. We're a little rebellious by our nature, and so we tend to not care too much about rules to the point of resisting our own federal government. And good for us on that, because that's the only way we've made any progress. But on the federal level, still, I mean, doctors risk their licenses, and they offer what we call a recommendation, which is not a prescription. It's basically a doctor patting you on the head, like, and saying, well, you could have some chamomile tea to help you sleep, but you got to go out and get it yourself. That's the best a doctor can do for you here.
So do they not have like something where you can take to a dispensary and get that?
Yes, but it's all state regulated. It's not. So we have access, like literally in California where I'm at, there's a dispensary on every corner. You can't drive 5 miles down the road without seeing a billboard, a sign. You would think this state is made of weed. And yet every single one of them is illegal in federal law. Now, Matt Steinbrook is telling us that we have some special doctors that can prescribe it, and they have some little loopholes that some doctors can do some things with some things, but it's very limited.
Under state law, though, they're still, in a precarious situation as it relates to federal law.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's not a blanket bulletproof answer here. And all I wanted to do was just get you to understand that, a lot of people are thinking that we're so advanced in all of this. And just today, I was on the phone with a guy in California who has a friend in Ohio who just took a plea deal and is going to be a felon if he goes forward with his plea deal for having a couple of pounds of cannabis in a legal state. So just it's not what anybody thinks. It's a big Pandora's box. And we've got Devin in Canada who arranged this, and hopefully he'll pop on and say hi at least. But he's the one who facilitated your being a guest here, and they got even crazier rules. Like they have total federal approval. It's all federally allowed. In fact, they can mail it. Here in the States, it's a federal crime to mail any of this. We have people that have become felons for mailing cannabis, and
They were my neighbors in the prison. Yes.
exactly, it's just the craziest thing. And like every different place that decides to do this, like nobody's collectively figuring it out. Like you go in the scientific world, and when they were developing rockets and the atom bomb and all these things, everybody was working off of each other's work, right? They're saying, oh, well, this works, so we'll add that to it. And in a logical world, you take things that work and you build on them, right? No, in this legal crazy circus, everybody says, oh, I'm just going to come up with something new, and none of it works. It's the craziest thing in the world. All right, let's get to your story, though. This is really...
Can I ask you, so you can go to a dispensary,
Yes.
you can get this, you can get some cannabis,
Yes.
and then you can be arrested
Yes.
Yes.
for having that
Well,
cannabis that you
You
just
won't be
bought.
arrested for having that cannabis that you bought. It's
Right.
not really, you're not going to get arrested for possession. What you're going to get arrested for is if you decide to grow some of that cannabis yourself. And even if you're allowed to, like in certain places, you're allowed to grow 12 plants, or you can have 12 plants per person. Maybe you have 6 people in your house and each one grows 12 plants. Well, all of a sudden you've got 144 plants or 60 plants or whatever, however number, right? Well, you can grow quite a bit of cannabis out of a few plants if you're any good at it, right? You can grow multiple pounds on one plant if you're decent at it. Well, that's where the problem comes in. So you can grow the plants legally, but then you harvest those plants, and now you've got 12 pounds of cannabis sitting in 12 bags, and you drive from here to there and you get pulled over, and then you try to explain your 12 pounds to this guy, and he's going to go, oh no, nobody would have 12 pounds of weed in your car. You're selling it. And that's what happens. They get you with possession with intent to sell, transportation, or maybe you need medicine. So you're going to tell us about medicine. I'm going to tell you about medicine. I've been working with cannabis medicine for 40 years. And when we learned to extract and concentrate it and turn it into oil, it was literally 40 years ago. I was dabbling around in my little science experiment, figuring this stuff out. And turns out you can take 12 pounds and turn it into a jar of really strong oil pretty easily. And well, that's all great. And as you might know, that can be very, very helpful for a lot of people. But if you get stumbled upon while you're making this, well, all of a sudden you're El Chapo in his, whatever fentanyl making lab is the way they see you. You're some evil genius, doing witchcraft, and that's the way they see it. So they call it manufacturing a controlled substance. All of a sudden it sounds more like you're making meth or something terrible, and that's how they see it. And so they don't understand, like, if somebody's got a disease or an illness that requires a concentrated oil, maybe it needs multiple types of oil. Maybe they need a sativa oil and an indica oil. Maybe they need a 1-to-1 oil or 3-to-1 or 4-to-1 or different things. Well, it takes a lot of cannabis to make each of those, right? And so they don't understand. I've sat in courtrooms all over the country when experts have tried to explain the reason why this defendant had this much cannabis, and nobody gets it. They just don't understand. And then if they stumble upon a lab that maybe has some scientific glassware, which makes for a good, clean product, oh, look at that. It's a high-tech, drug lab. And that's what they do. And they, there's no sense to it. The law enforcement I don't have a college degree. I'm an idiot compared to these geniuses, and yet I've learned how to do stuff that they can't comprehend. And by trying to do it well, I get branded a bad guy that was doing bad things. And that's that's the chaos that's endemic in our system. And so as much as it sort of makes sense, like I can go to the store and buy a little bit. Okay, but it's expensive. See, what they did here is they turned around and taxed the hell out of it. And that's how they sold it to the citizens. They says, oh, well, it's going to be good for the community because we're going to raise all this money and it'll be for the children. You know how they do it. And everybody says, oh, okay, it's for the children. Let's be safe. And then they get the money and the children don't get anything because they never do. And basically the people that need it the most, they can't afford it. When somebody has a medical emergency, whether it's a chronic disease or an acute problem that requires a lot of medical care, most of these people, it depletes everything they have. And you can't work, you're taking care of your loved one, unless you're already independently wealthy, which most of them are not, you end up in some kind of a state aid, you get some kind of a fixed income, and then you go to try to spend extra money to go get cannabis at a licensed facility, you're not going to be able to do it. So many people go to the black market because maybe you trust the person who's making it, and maybe you do your due diligence. You don't know your pharmacist, and people go to there and they're like, take an empty bottle, a blank bottle of pills, and they just, doctor said, I'll just take it. And yet everybody freaks out over this flower that somebody grew and says, oh, well, we don't know what it is. I'm like, well, I know it's a flower. So, well, why don't you get in and start telling your story a little bit? And I'm glad to answer any questions, and we can go further at any time you like. But I really want to hear about your son and your story, because I think people don't realize so much that the level of effort and risk and hardship that people go through just to try to take care of their family and their loved ones.
Yeah, so my son's Ben, or Boisterous Ben, on Facebook.
I like that. I like that term. I fancy that as a badge of honor.
And he's on Twitter as well, and Stop Ben Seizures on TikTok. And he's had epilepsy all of his life, very severe form of epilepsy. He's got brain damage, he's got cerebral palsy down his right side, and he just had hundreds of seizures every single day of his life. But he suffered drop seizures as well, which meant that he would drop to the floor, bang his face, his body. He'd end up bleeding. We'd have ambulances all the time to the house. We went. We tried multiple drugs in different combinations to try and stop the seizures, ketogenic diet, all sorts of different things, and nothing worked.
Wow.
And then we were looking at brain surgery, and we went to a big London hospital called Great Ormond Street. And during that time, there was people in there. There was a lot of talk about a drug called Epidiolex.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And they were going to do trials. And I asked about it. This is in 2014. And we were told it was only for certain conditions, like certain rare conditions. And basically, my son couldn't have access to it.
Wow.
So we went away, and I kept seeing more and more things about cannabis, seeing things online, and it's hard to know what's real and what's not online sometimes. Yeah. So you're looking at it and you're thinking, oh, is that real?
Right. For sure.
So then you start looking at like legitimate, places to actually, read studies on different things, and there was a lot of anecdotal sort of evidence coming up, and groups, on the epilepsy groups, there was a lot of parents, especially from America and places like that, saying about CBD all the time. So
right,
we asked again in 2016, at the our local hospital, which is still a big hospital, and again told no, they hope to be able to prescribe it soon, but they can't at the moment. Again told no, they hope to be able to prescribe it soon, but they can't at the moment. I think that's
Sorry. You
accurate.
keep telling your story. I got to shut my dogs up. They're going crazy, but keep going, please.
So yeah, so we basically a friend of ours, we were trying CBD oil from 2016, and it was great for his cerebral palsy, and he seemed to come a lot better with that. He was moving better, he wasn't stooped anymore, but it didn't do anything for the seizures at all. And then a friend of ours, we'd been in hospital again. Ben had to have a CT scan because they thought he'd fractured his skull. And a friend of ours had been to Canada, brought a load of prescribed one-to-one CBD oil back from there, and for their own condition. And they didn't know it was illegal to bring it back or anything about that. They just brought it back, and they said, do you want to try some? So we said, well, yeah, we haven't got any, what have we got to lose? We tried everything else. So we tried this cannabis oil. I tried it first just to check that it was okay.
Was this just a straight concentrate, or was it an oil, an infused oil?
It was an infused oil. It was with it was a one-to-one in an MCT oil.
Perfect, gotcha.
Yeah,
I know a guy who makes that.
It was the Kootenai Medical Tree. In Canada.
Okay.
I don't think that they trade now, because I think from what the man said to me, I mean, I didn't even know it was a one-to-one oil until I actually started to email the man who owned the clinic.
Okay.
But I was just giving him drops of it, and his seizures went from hundreds a day to just 6 a day.
Wow.
We were just, just one day it was like suddenly like, have you seen him have any, how many seizures have you seen today, to my husband? And it was amazing.
How much were you giving him? Just a few drops, or what? I mean,
we were building it up in drops. So we give a drop, started with a drop at night, and then we give a drop at night and a drop in the morning.
So he wasn't even getting enough to feel that effect. It wasn't getting him high or anything. I mean, it was just working.
No, it wasn't getting high at that point, but as we tried to increase it, we saw him get quite sleepy, and it wasn't, it just wasn't, we couldn't increase it to get the a seizure freedom, which is what everyone chases. You think, right, well, you hear that other parents say their children are seizure free. So you start trying to look for that. And we then, obviously I wrote to my MP, and I asked for the licenses. So in the UK, when the law was changed, the children that were at the forefront of the campaigns, they were given government licenses, and that then changed to an NHS prescription. So, or NHS funded prescription. So theirs is funded, so they get theirs for free.
Okay.
So we asked at the time, could we have the same? And I was told that there would be a route for my child to be able to obtain the medicine, and that they were putting certain things in place. And they put a government access panel together. So your clinician, your neurologist had to fill out the forms, and our neurologist was really supportive. He saw the difference for Ben. So he filled out all of the government access, but it had to be countersigned by the clinical director. And the clinical director said, yes, I'm going to sign it off, but we just need to get a meeting together, get some policies into place. Like if we get it, where we're going to keep it, because at this point it was still Schedule 1 drug until the law actually changed on the 1st of November in 2018.
Okay.
So I agreed. I said, okay, that's fine. And then he retired. And
Oh,
then it didn't
no.
happen. And we ran out of the Canadian oil, and Ben was back to having.
You just had one bottle you
procedures.
were working out of? You just had one bottle and that was it?
I had, it was, so the man brought big vats of it back in blueberry bottles.
Oh, good. Good for her.
So he brought lots of it back, and
Okay.
he said, did I want some? And he did offer to fly us out to get more
Yeah.
when we got in the hospital. But they said to us that I was talking to some of the parents that were at the forefront of the campaigns at the time, and one of them had said to me that realistically the government panel was being disbanded, so it would probably be better to go and try and get Epidiolex, which at that time was only on a compassionate basis. So I think there was 5 people per hospital. And in some hospitals, only 3 throughout the UK. So we put to this, we applied to them then to get it, because Ben was in such a bad state in the hospital. He's having seizures. They were seeing many over 20 minutes long.
Wow.
And they were increasing in the time. And that's what happens with Ben. They get closer together.